Alright, so we should have everything going. We are live now. Apologies for being a minute late. Appreciate you, Provo. Didn't quite bridge that premiere to live stream gap as smoothly as I would have liked, but we're here anyway. So, with my makeshift panel and my let's see, music going. Anyway, if the volumes are all bad where the music is louder than me, let me know. Give me a couple minutes to let this music going, and if this music is not, you can't hear it, let me know also. I just need like 2 more minutes to get ready, and then we'll jump into it. Pretty excited to be doing this one. I've taken quite a few notes. Wanted to make sure that even though I barely do anything on the internet, I'm at least proficient enough at this point now to be able to put off some stuff that other people on the internet might be able to at least enjoy, hopefully benefit from as well. So, be back in a second. Alright, executive decision. After this song, I'm going to play basically the only music video from back in the day doing band shit. So I can, because it's somewhat relevant. I'm a fake like it's relevant, right? So here we go. And it'll buy me a couple more seconds. See? Alright, I'm almost ready. I promise, guys. Appreciate appreciate everybody for hanging out. So far, we're just about ready to go. Give me like 2 more minutes.
I'm still picking myself up. It may not be dramatic. Two stories never are as pretty. But it's me standing up again, wiping the shame and dirt from my face with this rag, with more stains on it. Above brighter than children have had cross dreams. Don't let me be known or speaking out both sides of my mouth, or to be found a fool, believing what side I'm not. I'm not a part of the scoop of this world, and I'm not the prettiest, but you think I heard. I'll take my life one step at a time. Take my life one step at a time. Take my life one step at a time. One time I may be trusted and brings king, but you're a broken lock. You're open for anything. Nobody sequels, no dramas, no sequels. Nobody sequels, no dramas, no sequels. Nobody sequels, no dramas, no sequels. Nobody sequels, no dramas, no sequels.
All right. So, just to give everybody the quick intro of tonight's stream as your Friday Night's Dancing Monkey on the YouTube. I refuse to say it at this point. I will be giving you guys the breakdown. Now, mind you, this is comparing a work of fiction to another work of fiction. So, we can suspend disbelief. We can get rid of... Sorry, I have to stop my initial monologue to make sure that EBT knows that, yes, indeed, that is a Funko Pop. However, I feel like it is a post-ironic Funko Pop, considering that Funko Pop's name is Assface. He's one of the characters in the Preacher series, of the graphic novel series. Oh damn it, I wish I could bring my mic over there to explain it, but okay, I'm literally just looking at it. So we will how do I do the fucking... I want to make this the main one solo layout. There we go. All right, so to give you a quick rundown of what you are looking at there's a few different things to gaslight, some sort of gun things, so we'll just ignore them outright, just because they're funny in themselves. But in the far right, you have Arseface, or Assface, whatever way you want to name it. He's a character from the graphic novel series Preacher. He ended up he's basically he's a fucking retard. He's literally a low IQ person who became entranced with the lore of the singer of Nirvana. And he was a mildly okay performer. He was basically your local garage band kid that knew how to play a few fucking, you know, Free Falling and a couple other songs on an acoustic guitar. Your local friend like that, right? But he became so obsessed with the Kurt Cobain lore that he thought that somehow his way to fame would end up being blowing his head off. It goes into more detail in the Preacher series because he ends up being kind of not just a comedic relief to that whole story, but also kind of like it's written by two atheists, so they try and take stupid jabs at Christians and use him as the leverage for it. It's pretty cheap, but it is still kind of entertaining. So going from there, that's the explanation of the Funko Pop. If you want to know more about the Preacher series, there is also shameless plug that I'm not going to get any money for. God damn, what a shame. FX or other series places put up the whole, not the whole, a couple seasons of what is the Netflix equivalent of, you know, doing graphic novel to TV series adaptation of the story. It's okay, but it's not great. So that's that whole story and why Arseface over there has become so popular. He became Funko Pop. So it's, you know, a double-edged sword. I thought it was still funny, and getting it for $3 was worth it to me. Moving on from there, I have this boar tusk and snake vertebrae necklace that a village chief gave to me in Papua New Guinea. That is resting on top of the stein that I bought while I was in Germany. The interesting thing about this stein is it's St. George, and he's slaying the dragon, and there's a lot of things in my personal life that have just come full circle of that being representative, I guess, of where I ended up. So it's very cool to me, and it's been lasting a long time. All right, now moving further, we have the Hobby Lobby. It was Michael's. I bought that stupid box over there from Michael's. It was that plain wood on the inside color. Initially, I stained it and then did the wood burning of the Illuminati logo. That's where all the Illuminati cards from the 90s Illuminati game reside with me. The rest you can figure out. So there's that. Let's go back to theater mode. Yeah, cinema layout. All right, so basically, one of the reasons I wanted to do this stream tonight was because I've been absolutely obsessed with the C.S. Lewis series, especially the middle book, Perelandra, which I would compare it as far as level of quality storytelling compared to The Two Towers by Tolkien, the middle book of his series. And it comes as no surprise considering they were both best friends, and there's a whole entire, you know, background to that stuff. Excuse me. Had a couple beers because I had to make sure I worked up the nerve to actually try and give a good swing at this, because I know if I fucking bomb it, I deserve the smoke, because I give everybody else so much shit. So That's why I figure I'm going to actually take a decent swing at this. So going back to my initial reason for this is in the story Perelandra, it's basically the premise is, without revealing too much, even though I'm going to basically give away the entire story. And honestly, it was written in the mid 1900s, so if you haven't read it by this point, like, blow the spoiler alert shit out your ass. I don't care. Chapter 10 is where it becomes really intense because at this point, Ransom's friend has now completely given himself over to a demon. In a previous chapter, he basically performs like a, I don't want to say incantation because I don't know what all that verbiage entails, but for lack of a better term, he basically says, like, I've understood that the truth is New Ageism, and I welcome this God that has been teaching me. And from there, everything just goes absolutely downhill because whatever has come to possess him no longer cares about having a discussion between him and his old friend. He's now solely concerned with destroying the innocence and purity of this new planet that Satan himself, you'll find later, that's what possessed him, has found himself on planet Venus. So being able to, by miracle of chance or destiny, should you call it, Satan has found a way to escape Earth and has an opportunity to, if you want to look at each planet as if they have a guardian, because and again, this is getting into so many weeds that I have to remind everybody that this is a work of fiction compared to another work of fiction, but I want to make it a little bit fun. So I just got to lay the groundwork. I appreciate you guys bearing with me on all the, ground rules for the fucking LARP that we're about to play. So, how do I explain this? It's so frustrating. So basically, you know what? Actually, let's just play. So I was trying to, soften things. I'm going to run this chapter 10 from Perelandra on 1.75 speed for everybody. However, if you're not as tistic as I am, I have also made sure to set up the closed captions so you can watch it and you shall be able to keep up. And I have a bunch of notes in here that I wanted to talk about as it goes, so I'll let it run kind of in the background while I hit the high notes. So let's go, because I want to get to actually comparing C.S. Lewis to Zelda.
Chapter 10. Sleep proved to indeed be the problem. For what seemed a great time, cramped and wearied, and soon hungry and thirsty as well, he sat still in the darkness, trying not to attend to the
So at
unflagging
this
repetition
point,
of ransom,
you can
ransom,
see
ransom.
basically
But presently he found himself listening to a conversation of which he knew he had not heard the beginning of, and realized that he had
he's been
slept.
debating
The lady
Satan,
seemed to be saying very little. Weston's
trying
voice was
to
speaking gently and
defend,
continuously. It was not talking
all
about
of
the
his
fixed lands, nor
corruption,
about Maladil. It appeared to be telling, with extreme beauty and pathos, a number of
solicitations
stories.
towards
And at first Ransom
Venus.
could not perceive any connecting link between them. They were all about women, but women who had apparently lived at different
And
periods of the world's
it
history,
basically
and
wears
in
him
quite
out
different
because he's a human
circumstances.
being.
From the lady's
And
replies, it
he
appeared
ends
that the
up
stories
finding
contained much that
himself
she did not
waking up
understand. But oddly enough, the unman did not mind. If the questions aroused by any one
very
story proved
late
at all difficult to answer,
into
the speaker simply
multiple
dropped that story and
conversations.
instantly began another. The heroines of the stories seemed all to have suffered a
And
great deal.
the reason
They had
this
been oppressed by
chapter,
fathers,
especially
cast
like
off by husbands,
that
deserted by
moment
lovers.
where he just
Their
said,
children had risen up against
where
them, and
she
society
just said
had driven them out.
that he
But the stories
would
all ended in a
drop
sense
a
happily,
story
sometimes with honors and
immediately,
praises to a heroine still living, more often
points
with
out to
tardy
me a
acknowledgement
lot
and
of
unavailing
how
tears
a
after her
lot of
death.
these people
As the
and
endless speech proceeded,
characters
the lady's
act
questions grew always
when
fewer,
they try and
some
make
meaning for the
arguments
words
at this
death and
point. They
sorrow,
know
though
that
a
it's
kind of
empty
meaning
and
Ransom could not have
vapid.
guessed was apparently being created
And
in her
under
mind by mere
scrutiny,
repetition. At last
quite
the dawned upon him
honestly,
what all these
most
stories
of
were
these
about.
arguments
Each one of these women had
fail
stood forth alone
themselves
and braved a terrible risk for a
because
child, her
they
lover,
are
or her people.
lies.
Each had
They're
been
meant to
misunderstood,
evoke
reviled, and
emotion,
persecuted,
or
but
they're
each
meant to
also
get you
magnificently
to do
vindicated by the event.
something that
The precise
the
details were often not very
speaker
easy to
has an
follow.
ulterior motive
Ransom had more
for.
than a suspicion that many of these noble pioneers had been what in ordinary terrestrial speech we call witches or perverts. But that was all in the background. What emerged from the stories was rather an image than an idea. The picture of the tall, slender form, unbowed though the world's weight rested upon its shoulders, stepping forth fearless and friendless into the dark to do
This
for
the
others
important
what those
part.
others forbade it to do, yet needed to have done. And all the time, as a sort of background to those goddess shapes, the speaker was building up a picture of the other sex. No word was directly spoken on the subject, but one felt them there as a huge, dim multitude of creatures, pitifully childish and complacently arrogant.
So as you can
timid,
see,
conspicuous,
this
unoriginating,
the
sluggish and
unman,
ox-like,
basically
rooted to
the
the earth
person
almost in
who
their
has
indolence,
become
prepared to try nothing,
possessed
to
by
risk nothing,
Satan,
to make no assertion, and
now
capable of
trying
being
to
raised
tempt
into full life
Venus
only by the
herself,
unthanked and rebellious virtue of their females. It was
is
very well
trying
done.
to instill
Ransom,
these
who had little
different
pride of
noble
sex,
virtues.
found himself for a few moments all but believing it. In the midst of this, the darkness was suddenly torn
just
by a
think
flash of
about
lightning.
that-
A few
that
seconds later
idea of
came a
the
revel of
noble
Perelandrian thunder, like the playing of a heavenly tambourine, and after that, warm rain.
sacrifice, or
Ransom did not regard it.
etc.
The flash had shown him the unman sitting bolt upright, the lady
Because
raised
we're
on one
gonna tie
elbow, the
those
dragon laying awake at her head,
into
a grove of trees behind,
the
and great
Zelda
waves against the
story.
horizon. He was thinking of what he had seen. He was wondering how the lady could see that face, those jaws monotonously moving, as if they were rather munching than talking, and not know the creature to be evil. He saw, of course, that this was unreasonable of him. He himself was doubtless an uncouth figure in her eyes. She could have no knowledge either about evil or about the normal appearance of terrestrial man to guide her. The expression on her face, revealed in the sudden light, was one that he had not seen there before. Her eyes were not fixed on the narrator. As far as that went, her thoughts might have been 1,000 miles away. Her lips were shut and a little pursed. Her eyebrows were slightly raised. He had not yet seen
So
her
at
look
this
so like a
point,
woman of our
they're
own
trying
race,
to paint
and
the
yet her expression was one he had
picture
not very
of,
often
her
known on Earth,
really
except
starting to
as
see
he
the
realized with a shock on the
nobility
stage.
of-
Like a tragedy queen was the disgusting comparison that arose in his mind. Of course, it was a gross exaggeration. It was an insult for which he could not forgive himself. And yet, the tableau revealed by the lightning had photographed itself on his brain. Do what he could, he found it impossible not to think of that new look in her face. A very good tragedy queen, no doubt. The heroine of some very great tragedy, very nobly played by an actress who was a good woman in real life. By earthly standards, an expression to be praised, even to be revered. But remembering all that he had read in her countenance before, the unself-conscious radiance, the frolic sanctity, the depth of stillness that reminded him sometimes of infancy and sometimes of extreme old age, while the hard youth and valiancy of faith and body denied both, he found this new expression horrifying. The fatal touch of invited grandeur, of enjoyed pathos. The assumption, however slight, of a role seemed a hateful vulgarity. Perhaps she was doing no more. He had good hope that she was doing no more than responding in a purely imaginative fashion to this new art of story or poetry. But by God, she'd better not. And for the first time, the thought, "This can't go on," formulated itself in his mind. "I will go where the leaf covers us from the rain," said her voice in the darkness.
Emphasis of
Ransom
this
hardly
can't
noticed
go
that he was getting
on,
wet. In a world
is
without
something
clothes, it is
that
less
I'm going
important.
to,
But he
drive
rose when he heard her
home
move and
later
followed her as
in
well as he could by ear. The unman
another
seemed to be
thought
doing the
that I
same.
have written down.
They progressed in total darkness on a surface as variable as that of water. Every now and then there was another flash. One saw the lady walking erect, the unman slouching by her side, with western shirt and shorts now sodden and clinging to it, and the dragon puffing and waddling behind. At last they came to a place where the carpet under their feet
I
was
put
dry,
it up to
and there
this
was a
speed
drumming noise of rain on
because,
firm leaves above their heads. They lay
I
down
mean,
again.
with
At another
this
time,
stream,
began the unman at
I'm
once,
not
there
gonna
was a
try
queen in our
and
world who ruled over another
rush
land.
through everything.
"Hush," said the lady. "Let us listen to the
In
rain."
other streams, I've just
Then
kinda
after a moment she
tried to
added, "What was
dump
that?
information
It was some
in,
beast I've never heard
and
before."
this time I'm going
And indeed
to
there had been
try
something
and,
very like a low growl beside them.
actually
"I do not
go
know,"
ahead and
said the
take
voice of Weston.
things
"I think I do," said Ransom.
slow and
"Hush,"
make
said the
sure
lady again,
I've
and no more was
hit
said that
home
night.
every point that
This was the beginning of a series of days and nights which Ransom remembered with loathing for the rest of his life.
Hey, it would
He had
be
been only too correct
really
in supposing
not
that his enemy
retarded
required
of
no
you
sleep.
to,
Fortunately, the lady did.
pull the
But she needed a
stupid
good deal less
images
than
out of the
Ransom,
way.
and
There we
possibly,
go.
as the days passed, came to take less than she needed. It
That's
seemed to
better.
Ransom that whenever he dozed, he awoke to find the unman already in conversation with
Damn,
her.
it's
He was
already
dead
dark
tired.
outside.
He could hardly have enjoyed it at all
Calm
but for the
down,
fact that their hostess quite
down.
frequently dismissed them both from her presence. On such occasions, Ransom kept close to the unman. It was a rest from the main battle, but it was very imperfect rest. He did not dare to let the enemy out of his sight for a moment, and every day its society became more unendurable. He had full opportunity to learn the falsity of the maxim that the Prince of Darkness is a gentleman. Again and again he felt that a suave and subtle Mephistopheles with red cloak and rapier and a feather in his cap, or even a somber tragic Satan out of Paradise Lost, would have been a welcome release from the thing he was actually doomed to watch.
This
It was
is the
not like
part
dealing with a
that
wicked
really
politician at all.
started
It was much more like being set to guard an imbecile or a monkey or
unsettle
a very
me
nasty child.
when I thought about the
What had
fact
staggered and
that,
disgusted him
you
when
know,
it first began
we've
saying
always
ransom,
been
ransom, continued to
told
discuss
that
him every
the,
day and every
the whole
hour.
Satan
It showed
idea
plenty of
is
subtlety and
this-
intelligence when talking to the lady, but Ransom
this
soon perceived that
cunning
it regarded
evil
intelligence
that
simply and
just,
solely as a
you know,
weapon, which it had
it
no more wish to employ on
waits,
its off-duty
it
hours than a soldier has
plots,
to do bayonet
whatever,
practice when he is on leave.
and realistically,
Thought was for it
intelligence
a device
belongs
necessary
to
to certain
God.
ends, but thought in itself did not interest
Planning
it.
belongs
It
to
assumed
God.
reason as externally and inorganically as it had assumed Weston's
Forethought
body.
belongs to
The moment
God.
the lady was out of sight, it seemed to relapse.
This thing possesses
A great deal of
none
his time was
those
spent in
things.
protecting the animals from it.
It's obsessed
Whenever it got out of sight,
with
or even a few yards away,
chaos,
it would make a grab at any beast or bird within its reach and pull out
violence,
some feathers or fur. Ransom tried whenever possible to get between it and its
suffering.
victim. On such occasions, there were nasty moments when the two stood facing each other. It never came to a fight, for the unman merely
And I
grinned
think
and perhaps
C.S.
spat
Lewis
and fell
does
back
a
little.
great
But
job
before that happened,
in
Ransom usually had opportunity
nailing
to
these
discover how
points.
terribly he feared it. For side by side with his disgust, the more childlike terror of living with a ghost or a merchandised corpse never left him for many minutes together. The fact of being alone with it sometimes rushed upon his mind with such dismay that it took all his reason to resist his longing for society, his impulse to rush madly over the island until he found the lady and to beg her protection. When the unman could not get animals, it was content with plants. It was fond of cutting their outer rinds through with its nails, or grubbing up roots, or pulling off leaves, or even tearing up handfuls of turf. With Ransom himself, it had innumerable games to play. It had a whole repertory of obscenities to perform with his own, or rather with Weston's body, and the mere silliness of them was almost worse than the dirtiness.
So that gives a fairly sufficient point of where things were at when it comes to Venus versus the Unman. Let me jump to 15 minutes, I believe, is where is the next part.
Now as the frightful abyss which parts ghosthood from manhood yawned before him, pity was almost swallowed up in horror, in the inconquerable revulsion of the life within him from the positive and self-consuming death. If the remains of Weston were at such moments speaking through the lips of the unman, then Weston was now not a man at all. The forces which had begun, perhaps years ago, to eat away his humanity had now completed their work.
Actually,
The intoxicated will, which had been
let's
slowly
skip
poisoning the
a little bit
intelligence
further.
and
So
the affection,
basically,
had now at last
before
poisoned
I
itself,
jump forward,
and the whole
I
psychic
will
organism had
let
fallen to
this
pieces.
play in the
Only a ghost
background.
was left,
So if I
an
ran
everlasting
along up
unrest,
to that
a
point,
crumbling,
maybe
a ruin,
it'll work
an
out.
odor of decay. And this, thought Ransom,
But basically,
might be my destination,
at
or
20
hers.
minutes in,
But of course, the hours spent alone with the unman were like hours in
keep
the
an
back
eye
area.
on that.
The
At
real
20
business of
minutes
life
in,
was the interminable conversation
I made a
between the
note
tempter
to,
and the green
talk
lady.
about
Taken hour by hour, the progress was
all
hard to
of
estimate.
the
But as the days passed, Ransom could not resist the conviction
points
that the general
where
development was in
it
the
seems
enemy's
to
favor.
indicate that they get into
There were, of course,
the
ups and
debate
downs.
about
Often the unman was unexpectedly repulsed by some
what
simplicity, which
a
it seemed not to have
noble
anticipated.
choice it
Often,
is
too, Ransom's own
for
contribution
the
to the
woman
terrible
to
debate was for the
die
moment successful.
for the king
There were
of
times when he
Venus,
thought, thank God, we've
for
won at
her
last.
to be
But the enemy
willing
was never
to
tired, and
sacrifice
Ransom
her
grew more tired
life,
all the time.
for
And
her
presently he
to
thought he
be
could see
willing
signs that the lady
to
was becoming tired too.
undergo
In the end, he texted her with it and begged her to send them both away. But she
unfair
rebuked him,
to
and her rebuke
her
revealed how
so
dangerous the
that
situation
her
had already
love
become.
of the king
Shall I
can
go
be
and rest and sleep, she asked,
exemplified.
while all this lies on our hands?
And it
Not
is
till I am
to
certain
this
that there is no great need
point
to be done by me, for the king and for the children of our children.
that I
It was on
wanted
those
to
lines
draw
that
the
the enemy now worked more
comparison
exclusively.
between
Though the lady had no
Zelda
word for Judy,
and
he had made it appear to her in the
this
light of a
C.S.
duty
Lewis
that she could
story,
continue to fondle the idea of
because
disobedience, and convinced her
in
that
the
it would be
moment
cowardice to show
where
repulsed him.
Ransom
The
goes
ideas
ahead
of the great
and
deed or the great
basically
risk
just
of a kind of martyrdom
drives
were
home the
presented to her
point, but
every day,
loses his
varied in
cool
a
and
thousand
loses
forms.
the argument
The
in
notion
that
of waiting to
moment.
ask the king before a decision was made had become unobtrusively shuffled aside. Any such cowardice was now not
It's
to be thought
tragic.
of. The whole point of her
Because,
action, the whole grandeur,
I mean,
would lie in taking it without the
you're
king's
gonna have
knowledge,
to
in
listen
leaving
to
him
the story
utterly free to
yourself
repudiate
and
it,
see
so
if
that all
it
the
ends
benefits
up
should
as
be his,
tragic
and
as
all the
it
risks hers.
really
And with
is.
the risk,
But
of course, all the magnanimity, the pathos, the tragedy, and the originality. And also, the
yeah,
tempter hinted,
I
it would be no
hate
use asking the king,
stepping
for
all
he would
over
certainly
this,
not
but
approve the action. Men
we
were like that.
are okay. So
The king
let's
must be
just
forced to be
jump
free,
to
a matter
here.
which might have been more simply provided for, as it was with many plants. A moment later, it was explaining that men like Ransom in his own
Maybe
world,
we'll
men of
slow
that
it down
intensely male and backward-looking
just
type,
a
who
little
always
bit,
shrank
so
away
it's a
from the
little
new good,
more
who continuously
tolerable.
labored to keep women down,
Since
who
now
were childbearing
everybody
and to ignore the
has
high destiny for
acclimated
which
to
Malville had actually created her.
1.75,
It told her that such men had already done incalculable
1.5
harm.
will seem
Let her look to it that
reasonable.
nothing of the sort happened on Perelandra. It was at this stage that he began to teach her many new words. Words like creative and intuition and spiritual.
Yeah, this
but that
is
was one of its
this
false
is the
steps.
good part
When
right
she had
here.
at last been made to understand what creative meant, she forgot all about the great risk.
So
and the
remember, I
tragic
left the
loneliness, and laughed
captions
for a
in
whole
there
minute
for
on
anybody
end.
watching.
Finally, she told the
I
unman that it
want
was
to
younger,
make sure
even than
that I
piebald,
am,
and sent them both away. Ransom gained ground over that,
Not
but on the following day he lost it all by losing
unjustly
his temper.
comparing these different
The enemy
notes,
had
and
been
I
pressing on
wanted
her with
to,
more than
at
usual ardor
least
the
make
nobility
something
of
entertaining
self-sacrifice
for people.
and self-dedication, and the enchantment seemed to be deepening in her mind every moment when Ransom, goaded beyond all patience, had leaped to his feet and really turned upon her, talking far too quickly and almost shouting, and even forgetting his old solar and mixing English words. He tried to tell her that he'd seen this kind of unselfishness in action, to tell her of women making themselves sick with hunger rather than begin the meal before the man of the house returned, though they knew perfectly well that there was nothing he disliked more, of mothers wearing themselves to a ravelling to marry some daughter to a man whom she detested, of Agrippina and of Lady Macbeth. Can you not see, he shouted, that he is making you say words that mean nothing? What is the good of saying that you would do this for the king's sake when you know it is what the king would hate most? Are you Malil Bil that you should determine what is good for the king? But she understood only a very small part of what he said and was bewildered by his manner.
This is
The
what's
unman
so
made capital
tragic about
out of his
this
speech.
moment.
But through all the ups and downs, all
In
changes of
losing
the
his
front line,
cool,
all
even
counterattacks
though
and
he
stands
was
and
right,
withdrawals, Ransom came to see
he was
more
wrong.
and more clearly the strategy of the whole
How
affair.
many times
The lady's response
do
to the
people
suggestion
have
of being
those
a risk
moments where
bearer,
even
a
though
tragic
you were
pioneer,
right,
was still a response made
you
chiefly
said
out of
the
love for
right
the king
thing, you
and
said
for her
it
unborn children,
in
and
too
even in the
much
sense of
passion, or
Malil
you
Bil
said it in
himself.
the wrong
The idea that he might not really wish to be
phrasing,
obeyed to the
whatever,
letter
and
was the
even
sleuth
though
through
you
which the whole flood
knew
of suggestion had been
you
admitted to her
had
mind.
the high ground,
But
you
mixed
had
with this
the point.
response, from the moment when the unman began its tragic stories, there was the faintest touch of theatricality, the first hint of a self-admiring inclination to seize a grand role in the
And
drama of
this
her
is where
world.
it shows
It
there's
was
a
clear that the
deeper
unman's
problem
whole
that's
effort was to increase
been
this
taking
element.
root.
As long as this was but one drop, so to speak, in the sea of her mind, he would not really succeed. Perhaps, while it remained so, she was protected from actual disobedience. Perhaps no rational creature, until such a motive became dominant, could really throw away happiness for anything quite so vague
So the reason
as the
this ends
tempter's
up being
chatter
a
about deeper
problem is
life and
because
the
of the
upward
fact
path.
that when
The veiled egoism and the
Venus
conception of
is
noble
first
revolt
introduced,
must
she
be increased.
understands that
And Ransom
God
thought,
is
despite many
the
rallies on
one
her
who
part
holds
and many
everything
setbacks
together.
suffered
The
by the
reason
enemy, that it was,
she
very
lives
slowly
on the
and yet
islands and that she
perceptibly
doesn't live on
increasing.
the fixed lands
The matter
because
was, of course, cruelly
she has
complicated.
full
What
trust
the
in
unman
God.
said was
She
always
has full
very nearly
faith in
true.
God to provide
Certainly, it must be part of the
for
divine
her
plan
from day
that
to
this
day.
happy
She
creature should
doesn't
mature,
have
should become
things.
more and
She
more a
doesn't
creature
have a
of free
house
choice,
to
should
store
become, in a
things.
sense, more
And that's
distinct
what
from
the
God and from her
unman,
husband, in
aka
order thereby to
Satan,
be at
ends
one
up
with them in a
trying
richer
to
fashion.
tempt her
In
with
fact, he had seen this very
future
process
item
going on from the moment
that
at
I
which he
will
met her, and
bring
had
up
unconsciously
later.
assisted
But
it.
for now, we
present
will pause this. And so, in my comparison of this high ideal, basically, that C.S. Lewis tries to write out for the unman to suggest to the woman that you can see she is already in those moments where her eyes were closed, her lips were pursed. She's falling for it to some degree. And in that same degree, I noticed that as much as I used to appreciate the writing for the Legend of Zelda series, I've noticed a few different things are showing up in it. So let's jump to this tab. It's set to high. All right.
These are the newest Pixel devices engineered by Google.
I apologize.
Take better low-light photos with Night Sight. Get rid of unwanted distractions with Magic Eraser. And unblur your blurry memories with Photo Unblur. The Pixel Tablet Fold and 7A.
Almost through it.
Engineered by Google.
Here it goes. I talk to my plants like they're babies.
Hey,
So
you
I
didn't get
figured,
that personal to
you
get
know.
the State Farm personal price plan. It just helps you
I'll
create.
skip what I was saying. All right. So this scene should be at memory 13, which is what I was looking for, which is a king's duty. So I'm trying to compare, and obviously, like I said, this is comparing two fictions. It's not meant to be serious. It's meant to be loose stuff that you can apply to whatever, and also
Zelda.
fucking enjoy. It's a Friday night.
King Rauru, before you face the Demon King tomorrow. there is
So barring
something you
all
must tell me.
the time travel bullshit, because time
came-
travel is such a
I came
cheap
to the Sierra. After finding a man
writing tool
underground.
that even in this, like, there's a lot of shit that I'm going to actually avoid as far as like telling the true story of what happens in this game, because I think I could probably tell a better story, but it would be more tragic because the lesson should be learned better. At the end of this game, there ends up being no consequences really for different characters' actions. As you can see in this whole back and forth, Zelda desires greatly, even though she was magically transported into the past of no volition of her own. She thinks that she has a grand role to play. She is a great character to play, and she desires to set herself up into a larger stage than she, the human, deserves.
Set us on this path.
Now I get it.
Must atone for my error
Again,
judgment.
work of fiction.
And above
She's
all
not
else,
human. She's a goddess.
remain king
She's
of Hyrule.
traveled through time.
As
She's
with
a.
any leader,
I don't
it is
care.
my
I
duty
really
to
don't care.
safeguard and
I'm
protect
trying
my
to make
people.
my point. So can you
Even
let
if
me make my point?
I must risk my life.
All right. I'll maybe drop the panel link and let people give me commentary.
And if it
since,
proves impossible for us to defeat Ganondorf,
I got the panel
we
open
rely
now.
on your knight.
If
And that
people want to
legendary
hang
sword
out
he
and
carries.
talk about what I'm talking about, let me know
Our
in the
last line
chat.
of defense will be
I
lit.
might drop the link.
But remember, that was a future where you never appeared in this world.
So at this point,
You are
basically,
here
you
now.
can see that there's,
Zelda,
this
I
character
believe there
that's
is a reason you were
pitching
sent to us.
the idea of
It has to mean something.
a higher purpose. You were meant to do something, even though you were pulled out of your entire reality outside of your control. You somehow can gain back your control,
The reason I
and in so doing, be performing the greatest act of rebellion. Even though that greatest act of
Long ago,
rebellion
my people, known
would
as
be
the
the
Zonai,
most hated
came
thing
down from
by
the
the
heavens to
king,
the surface of the world.
it
was
would
said they were
somehow
descendants
equal
of
out.
gods.
And that's the thing that's
They
that's
bore
kind
treasures
of
from these same gods, secret
been
stones
hilarious
capable
for
of
me to try and
amplifying the
compare
abilities of
these
those
two
who
things.
possessed them.
so we'll
Using the
jump
knowledge
to
of the Zonai, my
let's see.
younger brother
All right,
Rauru became a
I
great leader.
want
He met a young woman
actually-
named Sonia, and they would wed.
this would probably be better. Jump to this.
he managed to restrain
So like I
him
said,
somehow.
after having listened to the majority of Chapter 10 of C.S. Lewis, I hope you can start to see not direct parallels. It doesn't have to be direct parallels, but
Link, I am not sure you'll be able to stop him.
the Zelda character now, having thought about her as this character that is literally a direct descendant of the king of Hyrule, if we're thinking about a monarchy, at this point, if you were to try and hold up a kingdom, the ways you would hold it up is by actually keeping somebody on the throne. And with what is suggested in C.S. Lewis, and then what is also suggested here with Zelda's path, there is a lie fed to the woman the same way there was a lie fed to Eve, that if you just go into a small act of rebellion, it doesn't matter what the rebellion it specifically is, but that is small enough and yet can be twisted enough to be a noble thing as a service to the king, to the kingdom, to anybody but themselves, they can justify doing a lot of different things.
Master Sword.
And initially in C.S. Lewis, what is suggested is
Telling me that Link is safe.
that Venus would potentially end her life
To find
for
me
the
in
sake
Hyrule
of
Street.
her unborn children. which was so preposterous because she still at that point of the story did not even have
I
children.
believe there is a reason you were sent to us.
All these things are
has
so
to mean
poisonous for modern society, in my opinion. These ideas of
I know why I am
taking
here.
control of the world and sending it onto a trajectory that you know
Something only I can do.
it is set to go on. You know without a doubt, like you are the author
We
of
will
it,
finally
and
stop him.
it's something
To
that quite
become an
honestly I
immortal
struggle with
dragon
personally
is
from
to
time
lose
to time.
oneself.
You know, thinking that I swear up and down the end times are now, right? Everybody thinks that.
I'll be.
Quite honestly, I
Forever
think
changed.
everybody thinks that in every generation without fail. The only thing that prevents us from going absolutely schizophrenic is that moment of realizing
Link.
that, oh yeah, there was that whole thing where Jesus said, you're not going to know the day and time. So,
You must find me.
after that point, we get to what I would argue is one of the greatest scenes. Oh wait, no,
You're
it
saying
isn't
that
this
sword
one.
traveled through time the
I got
same
it.
way you
Let's
did?
see. So 43. I got 2 minutes to
Yes.
ramble
But more importantly, in my original
before we get to
time,
one of the greatest scenes, and then you
Demon
can,
King
either ignore
was
me
vulnerable
and
to even the
watch
smallest
the
piece of this sword.
text on the bottom, or listen to
Even
me.
someone
These,
like him has
yeah.
vulnerabilities.
They, see, it's so frustrating because there could be better writing for this, and
what
I have
exactly
to
are you
actually write
suggesting
it
we
better
do
for
with
them.
the sword?
You can see she's beat up,
Over time,
but she's,
Master
sitting
Sword
in a
is
chair.
able
Like,
to
why
absorb
wouldn't you
sacred
clean yourself up
power.
before you sat down
can
to give,
heal
like, any
itself
sort of
and even grow
counsel
stronger.
to
Curious.
whatever?
If you were able to empower it in
So
that way,
again, the
could
time
be the key to defeating the
traveling
Demon
aspect of the game makes it
But
somewhat dog
it
shit.
could take
The
centuries
Master
for that
Sword
sword
travels
to grow
back in
strong
time,
enough.
tells
The
Zelda
power
that
the
she
Demon
needs
King
to
wields.
try and figure out a way to
I do not
help
see how this can be
replenish
done.
it so
It
that
would be impossible
it
for
can
you to
be
provide
even
it with
more
sacred power for
powerful
so
than
long.
when it was initially destroyed
I can think
by
of one way.
the god Raru, the
You mean-
guy with the
Yes, I can do
eyeball in the
it. I
forehead.
have to.
I've told you, that act is forbidden.
This
for a
is
very
his
good
older
reason.
sister. Now
It
you
mean
would
throwing
say
yourself away.
that would be kind of esoteric, Stephen. He has an older sister. That would make him the demiurge, wouldn't it? That would make her the... Yes, listener,
able to
I do
change that.
understand what you're saying. That is why she's wearing the mask on her forehead,
The
because
moment I
if
had the
she were
sword,
to have pulled
I
it
knew what
down,
to do.
that owl face
I knew this
on
was
that
why I came to this era.
pseudo goat looking whatever
I
face thing going on. Yeah, it would give
want to
too much
restore
away.
the
I
Master
get it,
Sword
but that's why
and
they have it
deliver it
set
to
up that
Link.
way. So, and again, she's missing her left eye. All right, can we all agree? Like everybody gets it here. Like that's why I'm trying to say like it's a work of
I've made up
fucking
your mind.
fiction. But I'm trying to make some entertaining stuff.
Very well then. As a Zonai, I bear my share
Oh.
of blame for these events.
That's...
So I too will devote myself to this.
I
game
am very
and to this hero
sorry.
of yours.
I am about to go
For the
through
swordsman
some
king,
very serious
I will do everything
spoilers
I
here.
can.
So,
Even if my body should perish,
if
I
you
will
do
still be
not
with you in
want
spirit.
to know what happens to Zelda after this moment, you're going to probably want to not watch the rest of the stream. Because the entire premise is based on this next scene. So yeah, enjoy. This is let me pause it really quick. So at this point, Zelda has been thrust back in time after having traveled into a pyramid and seen this scene, right? Where there is what looks like Ganondorf being held in place by an arm. at the beginning of the game, and suddenly that arm dissipates. Ganondorf comes to life. Link tries to defend against a blast that Ganondorf throws towards them. The Master Sword shatters, and Ganondorf is thoroughly disappointed because he waited thousands of years locked down there by Rauru, and the moment he comes to, after having waited for the legendary fighter Link, he barely gets a nick on his face, not opposed to Nick Gurr, which will never get a cut on his face ever, because 13 do run the 50. It's all random stuff. I'm just rambling at this point. So, after having given that much time for anybody who doesn't want to have a spoiler to bail out, this is the most important memory as far as the Tears of the Kingdom series goes, and this is what the entire stream is built around.
Was that the sword that seals the darkness? A blade that shatters so easily against my power cannot save you from me.
The sword will continue to gain strength if bathed in sacred power. The stronger that power, the more powerful the sword becomes.
After all, you possess more than
So also, I guess I should have also included the whole idea of these tiers, these stones. If you can harness them like Zelda has, or Ganondorf has on his forehead, if you harness them, it maximizes your power. If you eat them, you lose yourself and you become a dragon, completely emotionally uninvolved with the world surrounding you, having ascended beyond the trivial problems of life. You can become a god if you just do this one thing. If you just go outside the bounds,
I will care for it until the time comes.
if you just break
I will pour my
one
sacred
rule.
power into it. It will be the weapon that defeats the Demon King.
the sacrifice of the divine feminine. The trick that most women usually fall for is wanting a grander stage. Not unlike men, but similar in different ways. And her promise, or her hope for Link, is the same as in C.S. Lewis. Listen to what she says. Oof. 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 Combo breaker. Brr, 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 brr. Sorry,
Pixel with
guys.
photo on blur.
Now Charlotte wakes up around.
Damn, they got me with the double barrel. Oh, sucks to
suck. And that's when I decided to add Quaker cereals into our before work starts morning routine. Quaker has a variety of cereal offerings to help families fuel for any morning with something nourishing and delicious.
Protect them all!
Now, as a mother, as a queen, as a princess, as a goddess, feminine in a different way. Now at this point, she's basically taken the choice to become an immortal being so that she can carry the Master Sword stuck into her forehead the same way Rauru had his third eye. She is immortal now. She's been thrown into the past without explanation. The Master Sword has traveled in the past to chase after her and also seek refuge to where it can heal itself and be relevant for the future again.
Link. Link. The Master Sword. Your
So if you can
sword.
imagine, this is,
She is the key
well,
to destroying the Demon King.
suspension of disbelief if a character loses entire consciousness and becomes a disinterested deity like a dragon,
And
as
when you
this
two
game
next face the
tries to
Demon King,
portray. There are multiple dragons, especially at this point in games, which would suggest
you
that
will
different
have my
people
strength to
have
help you through
eaten
her.
these different deifying stones.
Link,
But this scene is also
you are
okay.
our final hope.
Yeah. It is still sad to think
reaches you in
that
the future.
basically Zelda has now. Alright, thanks for eat shit. Alright, let's pull that out. So that actually does the job of hitting all the spots that I wanted to talk about with Zelda and the comparison of the noble sacrifice type of lie that Satan tries to portray to women predominantly, because this is, and I'm gonna do another for the sake of justice, whatever. I'll make a stream that dunks on whatever you guys need, but is, I think, more relevant that these type of stories, since there is obviously some sort of perceived need for women's stories to such a degree that it is literally shoved down our fucking throats every blockbuster series summer. There's some sort of like strong female character that does whatever, right? Makes some ultimate sacrifice while the male is inept and doesn't know whatever. I felt that by comparison, because of it being pop culture, Zelda being a character that is perceived noble, at least I could take a shot at it to some degree. And again, it's literally a work of fiction. Somebody could make up an argument that's better for that. But by comparing it to C.S. Lewis, I would like to show that there are better characters. There are stronger people that you can look to. And that is the reason that me personally, I have gone towards orthodoxy, because the moment I started realizing, and maybe I just tried to speed run things and didn't want to do the whole Catholic jump and try and figure out that stuff. I wanted to go directly to what was the most OP version of theology, however you want to word it. I think I got so tired of finding that my thoughts and beliefs were so close to a society that I could see destroying itself, that I needed to find the belief system that was far enough opposed to it, while also not just opposed to it for the sake of being opposed to it. It was actually, it stood on its own, and in its own essence was diametrically opposed to the destruction of the world. So, having said all that, the reason I wanted to continue on with this is, well, basically, Perelandra has other chapters, and I wanted to go on to chapter 10, and then maybe even further, depending on how I'm feeling tonight. So I'm going to take a piss break and set up Perelandra chapter 11. If we make it through this chapter, we might go on and do how to recognize propaganda, the Cold War era educational film from 1957. So we might make this Steven's longest stream, barring the archaics bullshit. We'll see. Let's pull this up. Nope, that's not the one I wanted. Present. Oh no. I don't know if my I don't know if this laptop has much life left into it. Man, every time I try and pull up one of the share screens in StreamYard, section of it is green. It's just about to
awake the following night. The sea had become calm, and there was no rain. He sat upright in the darkness with his back against a tree.
The
others were close beside him. The lady, to judge her by her breathing, asleep.
I'm going to let it run for about...
waiting to arouse her and resume its solicitations the moment ransom should rose. For the third time, more strongly than ever before,
I'm going to let it run for a little bit, just because, honestly,
the enemy was
I
using
like
the
the book,
methods.
and
it seemed to
especially
ransom
this
that,
chapter.
but for a miracle,
I'm
the
going to
lady's
probably
resistance was bound to be worn away in the end. Why did no miracle come?
For a
or
couple
rather,
minutes, and
why
then
no
I'll
miracle
come
on the
back.
right side?
So,
for the presence of the enemy was in itself a kind of miracle.
If I see you
Had
guys
hell the
there
prerogative to
later,
work
let me
wonders?
know.
Why did heaven work
If
none? Not for the first
I'm gonna
time he
keep it
found
going.
himself questioning divine justice. He could not understand why Malil would remain absent when the enemy was there in person. But while he was thinking this, as suddenly and sharply as if the solid darkness about him had spoken with articulate voice, he knew that Malil was not absent. That sense, so very welcome, yet never welcomed without the overcoming of a certain resistance, that sense of the presence which he had once or twice before experienced on Perelandra, returned to him. The darkness was packed quite full. It seemed to press upon his trunk so that he could hardly use his lungs. It seemed to close in on his skull like a crown of intolerable weight, so that for a space he could hardly think. Moreover, he became aware in some indefinable fashion that it had never been absent, that only some unconscious activity of his own had succeeded in ignoring it for the past few days. Inner silence is for our race a difficult achievement. There is a chattering part of our mind which continues, until it is corrected, to chatter on even in the holiest places. Thus, while one part of Ransom remained, as it were, prostrated in a hush of fear and love that resembled a kind of death, something else inside him, wholly unaffected by reverence, continued to pour queries and objections into his brain. It's all very well, said the voluble critic, a presence of that sort, but the enemy is really here, really saying and doing things. Where is Malil representative? The answer, which came back to him, quick as a fencer's or a tennis player's riposte, out of the silence and the darkness, almost took his breath away. It seemed blasphemous. Anyway, what can I do, babbled the voluble self. I've done all I can. I've talked till I'm sick of it. It's no good, I tell you. He tried to persuade himself that he, Ransom, could not possibly be Malil representative, as the unman was the representative of hell. The suggestion was, he argued, itself diabolical, a temptation to fatuous pride, to megalomania. He was horrified when the darkness simply flung back his argument in his face, almost impatiently, and then he wondered how it had escaped him till now. He was forced to perceive that his own coming to Perelandra was at least as much of a marvel as the enemy's. That miracle on the right side, which he had demanded, had in fact occurred. He himself was the miracle. Oh, but this is nonsense, said the voluble self. He, Ransom, with this ridiculous piebald body and his 10 times defeated arguments, what sort of a miracle was that? His mind darted hopefully down a side alley that seemed to promise escape. Very well then, he had been brought here miraculously. He was in God's hands. As long as he did his best, and had done his best, God would see to the final issue. He had not succeeded, but he had done his best. No one could do more. 'Tis not in mortals to command success. He must not be worried about the final result. Melildil would see to that, and Melildil would bring him safe back to Earth after his very real, though unsuccessful efforts. Probably Melildil's real intention was that he should publish to the human race the truths he had learned on the planet Venus. As for the fate of Venus, that could not really rest upon his shoulders. It was in God's hands. One must be content to leave it there. One must have faith. It snapped like a violent string. Not one rag of all this evasion was left. Relentlessly, unmistakably, the darkness pressed down upon him the knowledge that this picture of the situation was utterly false. His journey to Perelandra was not a moral exercise, not a sham fight. If the issue lay in Melildil's hands, Ransom and the lady were those hands. The fate of a world really depended on how they behaved in the next few hours. The thing was irreducibly, nakedly real. They could, if they chose, decline to save the innocence of this new race, and if they declined its innocence, would not be saved. It rested with no other creature in all time or all space. This he saw clearly, though as yet he had no inkling of what he could do. The voluble self protested, wildly, swiftly, like the propeller of a ship racing when it is out of the water. The imprudence, the unfairness, the absurdity of it. Did Melildil want to lose worlds? What was the sense of so arranging things that anything really important should finally and absolutely depend on such a man of straw as himself? And at that moment, far away on Earth, as he now could not help remembering, men were at war. And white-faced subalterns and freckled corporals, who had but lately begun to shave, stood in horrible gaps, or crawled forward in deadly darkness, awaking, like him, to the preposterous truth that all really depended on their actions. And far away in time, Horatius stood on the bridge, and Constantine settled in his mind whether he would or not embrace the new religion. And Eve herself stood, looking upon the forbidden fruit, and the heaven of heavens waited for her decision. He writhed and ground his teeth, but could not help seeing. Thus, and not otherwise, the world was made. Either something or nothing must depend on individual choices. And if something, who could set bounds to it? A stone may determine the course of a river. He was that stone at this horrible moment, which had become the center of the whole universe. The Albilla of all worlds, the sinless organisms of everlasting light, were silent in deep heaven to see what Elwyn Ransom of Cambridge would do. Then came blessed relief. He suddenly realized that he could not know what he could do. He almost laughed with joy. All this horror had been premature. No definite task was before him. All that was being demanded of him was a general and preliminary resolution to oppose the enemy in any mode which circumstances might show to be desirable. In fact, and he flew back to the comforting words as a child flies back to its mother's arms, to do his best, or rather, to go on doing his best, for he had really been doing it all along. What bugbears we make of things unnecessarily, he murmured, settling himself in a slightly more comfortable position. A mild flood of what appeared to him to be cheerful and rational piety rose and engulfed him. Hello? What was this? He sat straight upright again, his heart beating wildly against his side. His thoughts had stumbled on an idea from which they started back, as a man starts back when he has touched a hot poker. But this time, the idea was really too childish to entertain. This time it must be a deception, risen from his own mind. It stood to reason that a struggle with the devil meant a spiritual struggle. The notion of a physical combat was only fit for a savage. If only it were as simple as that. But here, the voluble self had made a fatal mistake. The habit of imaginative honesty was too deeply ingrained in Ransom to let him toy for more than a second with the pretense that he feared bodily strife with the unman less than he feared anything else. Vivid pictures crowded upon him. The deadly cold of those hands. He had touched the creature accidentally some hours before. The long metallic nails, ripping off narrow strips of flesh, pulling out tendons. One would die slowly. Up to the very end, that cruel idiocy would smile into one's face. One would give way long before one died, beg for mercy, promise it help, worship, anything. It was fortunate that something so horrible should be so obviously out of the question. Almost, but not quite, Ransom decreed that whatever
Shout
the
out to my
silence and
homie,
the darkness seemed to be
Cancer
saying about
Culture.
this, no
I
such
don't know if
crude
he's
materialistic
up
struggle
on the
could possibly be what
live,
Malodil
or
really
if he's
intended.
starting from
Any
the
suggestion to the
beginning, but
contrary
he just
must be
dropped
only
into
his
the
own
chat,
morbid
so I wanted
fantasy.
to say what's up
It
to
would
him.
degrade the spiritual warfare
So,
to the condition of mere mythology.
now,
But here he got another check.
let me
Long since on
see if I
Mars,
can
and more strongly since he
try
came
and
to
stop
Perelandra,
it at a
Ransom had been
good
perceiving
stopping
that the
point.
triple distinction of truth from myth, and both from fact, was purely terrestrial, was part and parcel of that unhappy division between soul and body which resulted from the fall. Even on Earth, the sacraments existed as a permanent reminder that the division was neither wholesome nor final. The incarnation had been the beginning of its disappearance. In Perelandra, it would have no meaning at all. Whatever happened here would be of such a nature that Earthmen would call it mythological. All this he had thought before. Now he knew it. The presence in the darkness, never
This
before
point
so
is
formidable,
especially
was putting
interesting.
these truths into his hands like terrible jewels. The voluble self was almost thrown out of his argumentative stride, became for some seconds as the voice of a mere whimpering child, begging to be let off, to be allowed to go.
So, to catch everybody up of what is happening at this point in chapter 11. Basically, at this point, at the very beginning, we have, obviously, chapter 10 has happened, where even though he has won the argument, he has lost it, because at this point, the woman Venus has been in an interesting change of perspective compared to Eden, where Eve was only tempted once. We have here, she's constantly solicited by this monster, this demon. And that's why in the writing, if you go and read or listen to it yourself, the phrase "this can't go on" repeats as it deserves to be repeated, because, and I think it was established in the previous chapter, and I might have missed the high note to hit on it, but where Ransom makes the point that we are currently living in a time where, as far as from our perspective, time is the line that we march upon. Obviously, there are beings, angelic, demonic, and higher, that operate outside of time. We, however, do not. And because of this case, we mark things along that line. And for that reason, it is significant that we exist after the time where Jesus did rise from the dead, and we did have the Holy Spirit come at Pentecost. There are marked moments in history that do confirm that things are different. And in this same way, C.S.Lewis does a great job of talking about that fact that even though this is a new planet that he is on, it is also a new planet that Satan is on. And it is a fascinating concept to think about as a work of fiction, that, for lack of a better term, it was a miracle that Ransom, who never had thought of his name in the traditional form of a ransom because of what his name tradition came from, all these different things. I think he will actually be talking about this leading up to it. I probably did a really good job, or a really terrible job, of preemptively hyping up something that's about to happen. But there is a lot of this conflict between chapter 10 and 11 that shows, I guess, the difference between what would be the fiction out in other planets, like if, say, you know, all this stuff. However, juxtaposing it against World War II, which C.S. Lewis was in, he was injured by. And he does speak about, I believe, in this chapter, which makes it that much more compelling to me, that he does understand death. I'm probably actually wrong. I think he was actually in World War One. That would make more sense, because by World War II he was middle-aged and matches ran. Yeah, so sorry. He was in the worst war. He was in the trenches. He has probably seen horrific things that we're only privy to now because of things like Live Leak and the Ukrainian war. Hooray for us. That's what I'm trying to get to, honestly, at this point. The point I'm trying to drive home is everything that's being repeated on the fucking internet is repetitions of things that have existed in the past. There have been wars, there have been suffering, there have been conflicts of ideas, there have been theological debates that have drawn swords for. And at this point, we are living in a point where Pentecost has happened. Jesus, the Christ, has gone up to heaven to sit at the right hand of God. The Holy Spirit has come down. I'm not going to split hairs between the Catholics and the Orthodox, because, quite honestly, I think I would want to make those bonds the strongest they could ever possibly be, because as far as demographics go, like in what I was saying, I think in a TV stream previously, the difference between the so-called left and the so-called right is that whole idea of the left is very high-minded, and that is an advantage for them. Being hive-minded can be just rephrased as having a unified belief system. Imagine having a monoculture. Imagine having a group of people as large as the United States that got along because they all actually agreed on different philosophical level arguments. It's hard to imagine, but there was a time not long ago, and this isn't to say that any at all, because quite honestly, if there is any politician that exists to run, okay, sorry, I was trying to word this correctly so that it would be as absolutely glowy as possible, while also driving the point home of, like, I really don't, I'm not mincing words at this point. Like, no politician that is alive right now should be permitted to continue living if they have aspirations to continue in politics post whatever happens. because that in my mind shows a person of complete corruption who has no remorse and no ability to repent. And I think that's pretty much summed up what I think about politicians at this point. So after having clearly driven home that glowy ass point, let's get back to this video.
Go home. Then it rallied. It explained precisely where the absurdity of a physical battle with the unmanned lay. It would be quite irrelevant to the spiritual issue. If the lady was to be kept in obedience only by the forcible removal of the tempter, what was the use of that? What would it prove?
Debate.
And if the temptation were not approving or testing, why was it allowed to happen at all? Did Malal-Dil suggest that our own world might have been saved if the elephant had accidentally trodden on the serpent a moment before Eve was about to yield?
Just replace Malal-Dil
was it as easy and as unmoral as that?
From the Christian
thing was
perspective,
patently absurd.
Whatever.
The terrible silence went on.
One.
It became more and more like a face not without sadness, that looked upon you while you were telling lies, and never interrupts, but gradually you know that it knows, and falter and contradict yourself and lapse into silence. The voluble self petered out in the end. Almost the darkness said to Ransom, you know you are only wasting time. Every minute it became clearer to him that the parallel he had tried to draw between Eden and Perelandra was crude and imperfect. What had happened on Earth, when Malal-Dil was born a man at Bethlehem, had altered the universe forever.
This is the point that I was
The
trying
new
to drive
world of
home.
Perelandra was not a mere repetition of the old world Tellus. Malal-Dil never repeated himself. As the lady had said, the same wave never came twice. When Eve fell, God was not man. He had not yet made man members of his body. Since then, he had, and through them, henceforward he would save and suffer. One of the purposes for which he had done all this was to save Perelandra, not through himself, but through himself in Ransom. If Ransom
Okay, so I don't want it to go any further yet, because I feel like this. I mean, as much as I liked talking about the whole Zelda thing, it was fun. But this is the part that, like, really, actually, I care about because it's real life stuff. So I figured I would do, like, the bubblegum stuff. How far along are we? Just so let's check. All right, we're only at 117. That's fine. We will keep going. We'll probably we'll hit 2 hours and then we'll call it a night. How about that? Wherever we end up at. So. It's let's go back. Let's go back just a little bit further. Yeah.
that looked upon you while you were telling lies, and never interrupts, but gradually you know that it knows, and falter and contradict yourself and lapse into silence. The voluble self petered out in the end. Almost the darkness said to Ransom, you know you're only wasting time. Every minute it became clear to him that the parallel he had tried to draw between Eden and Perelandra was crude and imperfect. What had happened on Earth, when Malal-Dil was born a man at Bethlehem, had altered the universe forever. The new world of Perelandra was not a mere repetition of the old world Tellus. Malal-Dil never repeated himself. As the lady had said, the same wave never came twice. When Eve fell, God was not man. He had not yet made man members of his body. Since then, he had, and through them, henceforward he would save and suffer. One of the purposes for which he had done all this was to save Perelandra, not through himself, but through himself in Ransom. If Ransom refused, the plan so far miscarried. For that point in the story, a story far more complicated than he had conceived, it was he who had been selected. With a strained sense of fallings from him vanishings, He received that you
sin
might just as well call
from
Perelandra, not Tellus, the center.
maintaining a
You
foothold
might look upon the Perelandrian
in
story
Venus,
as merely an indirect consequence of the incarnation on Earth.
because he is
Or
just
you
a
might
man.
look
Like
on the
he's
Earth
not
story
this
as
isn't a
mere preparation for the
superhuman
new worlds,
person.
of
This
which
is just
Perelandra was the
somebody that
first.
in an earlier
The one was
chapter
neither more nor less true than the other.
basically just
Nothing was
performed
more
a
or less
simple
important than anything
little
else.
satanic
Nothing was a
litany,
copy
a
or
little,
model
little
of anything
baby, little
else.
satanic ritual,
At
just
the
a little
same time, he
sprinkle,
also
little
perceived that his
sprinkle
voluble
satanic
self had begged
ritual
the
stuff
question.
where
Up to this point, the lady had repelled her assailant. She was shaken and weary, and there were some stains perhaps in her imagination,
how
but
people
she had stood.
do
In that
regularly.
respect, the story already differed from anything that he certainly knew about the mother of our own race. He did not know whether Eve had resisted at all, or if so, for how long. Still less did he know how the story would have ended if she had. If the serpent had been foiled and returned the next day, and the next,
Arizona,
what then?
so you'll
Would the
have to
trial
deal
have
with the
lasted
white
forever?
noise.
How
I
would
apologize,
Malodil have
though.
stopped it? Here on Perelandra, his own intuition had not been that no temptation must occur, but that this can't go on. This stopping of a third-degree solicitation, already more than once refused, was a problem to which the terrestrial fall offered no clue. A new task, and for that new task a new character in the drama, who appeared, most unfortunately, to be himself. In vain did his mind hark back time after time to the book of Genesis, asking what would have happened. But to this the darkness gave him no answer. Patiently,
So the darkness is the presence of God. If you want to reference back to the beginning of this chapter where there was that presence that was coming upon him, it was that feeling where I don't know how many people can say, oh no. Hold on one second. You good, Penny? No. All right. This being the ghetto, it could be anything. So, getting back to where I was at. Oh yeah. So this is the whole the darkness, right? That is not answering ransom at this point is what's meant to be kind of the I don't know if you would call it an essence or an energy of God. I guess you know what? I'll let somebody smarter than me decide whether this work of fiction is describing an essence or an energy. Either way, it's meant to portray that type of idea where God has not disappeared at all from any situation. He has just merely been ignored. And it is this type of, I don't want to say mode or frequency or, well, we always lack the proper wording. And if ever there were an ability to properly explain what we thought or experienced about God, then I guess that wouldn't be God just on its face, considering we were able to fully describe it. But I digress. So this is that fascinating moment where it does, in a fictional form, start to ask people the question of the Holy Spirit has come down to earth. We do have the church that has continued in apostolic succession from Jesus to us and from Jesus to Adam. We have the complete line. As far as history goes, we have not only the complete line, like I said, we have Pentecost, we have the Byzantine Empire, we have World War I, World War II. Like, these are not things that we cannot include into the story of Christianity, because in all these moments, Christianity has not only survived, but it has thrived in different ways. Technologically, philosophically, it has gotten more refined. And, excuse me, it's I think to some degree it unfair. Well, damn it. No, that's not correct. I want for it to be seen as unfairly weighted upon the people that inherit this snowball effect of what's happened, right? But it is what it is. We're all here. We're literally just visitors. Like, we're not here for a long time. Like, why is it that big of a deal? No matter what amount of like craziness or suffering or whatever that ends up happening in the time that we are alive right now, why does it fucking matter how bad or good it is? You're in it. Like, I mean, obviously enjoy the bad. Sorry, enjoy the good, and try and mitigate the bad. But there's the deeper aspect that I guess I'm trying to dig at, that I don't think I'm properly representing. So we'll continue, since I've completely rambled myself into a hole. But this has been at least somewhat more cathartic for me to be able to get this stuff out and ask a few questions that I think I've been following along with. Yeah, fairly decently as far as my notes go. All right.
And inexorably, it brought him back to the here and the now, and to the growing certainty of what was here and now demanded. Already he felt that the words "would have happened" were meaningless, mere invitations to wonder in what the lady would have called an alongside world which had no reality. Only the actual was real, and every actual situation was new.
That part
Here in Perelandra,
is
the temptation
so
would be stopped by
good.
ransom, or
Fuck
it would not be
everybody
stopped
that
at
has
all.
all these different
The
alternate
voice, for it was
reality,
almost with a voice
universe,
that he was
whatever.
now
No,
contending,
the
seemed to create around this
actual
alternative
is
an
what's
infinite
actually
vacancy.
happening. Don't
This
get
chapter,
fucking
this page,
lost in all
this
this
very
Spider-Verse
sentence in the
bullshit.
cosmic story was utterly and eternally itself. No other passage that had occurred or ever would occur could be substituted for it. He fell back on a different line of defense. How could he fight the immortal enemy? Even if he were a fighting man instead of a sedentary scholar with weak eyes
This
and a
is
baddish
where a
wound
lot
from
of
the
people
last
get
war,
hung up.
what
This
use
is
was
what
there in
people
fighting
need to
it?
focus on.
It couldn't be killed, could it? But the answer was almost immediately plain. Weston's body could be destroyed, and presumably that body was the enemy's only foothold in Perelandra. By that body, when that body still obeyed a human will, it had entered the new world. Expelled from it, it would doubtless have no other habitation. It had entered that body at Weston's own invitation, and without such invitation could enter no other.
Like I had said
Ransom
earlier.
remembered that the unclean spirits in the Bible had a horror of being cast out into the deep, and thinking of these things, he perceived at last with a sinking heart that if physical action were indeed demanded of him, it was an action, by ordinary standards, neither impossible nor hopeless. On the physical plane, it was one middle-aged sedentary body against another, and both unarmed save for fists and teeth and nails.
Sedentary.
At the thought of these details, terror and
You gotta
disgust
respect C.S.
overcame
Lewis
him.
for being honest
To kill
about
the thing with
himself.
such weapons, he remembered his killing of the frog would be a nightmare. To be killed, who knew how slowly, was more than he could face. That he would be killed, he felt certain. When, he asked, did I ever win a fight in all my life? He was no longer making efforts to resist the conviction of what he must do. He had exhausted all his efforts. The answer was plain beyond all subterfuge. The voice out of the night spoke it to him in such an answerable fashion that, though there was no noise, he almost felt it must wake the woman who slept close by. He was faced with the impossible. This he must do. This he could not do. In vain he reminded himself of the things that unbelieving boys might at this moment be doing on earth for a lesser cause. His will was in the valley where the appeal to shame became useless, nay, makes the valley darker and deeper. He believed he could face the unman with firearms, even that he could stand up unarmed and face certain death if the creature had restrained Weston's revolver. But to come to grips with it, to go voluntarily into those dead yet living arms, to grapple with it, naked chest to naked chest, terrible follies came into his mind. He would fail to obey the voice, but it would be all right because he would repent later on when he was back on Earth. He would lose his nerve as St. Peter had done and be, like St. Peter, forgiven.
Jonah.
Intellectually, of course,
Jonah.
he knew the answer to those temptations perfectly well. But he was at one of those moments when all the utterances of intellect sound like twice-told tales. Then, some crosswind of the mind changed his mood. Perhaps he would fight and win. Perhaps not even be badly mauled. But no faintest hint of a guarantee in that direction came to him from the darkness. The future was black as the night itself. It is not for
you
nothing
don't just get out
that you are
clean
named
just for
Ransom,
thinking
said
you're
the voice.
noble.
And he knew that this was no fancy of his own.
It's
He knew
still
it
a
for a
fight.
very curious reason, because he had known for years that his surname was derived not from Ransom, but from Ranulph's son.
There we go.
It would never have occurred to him thus to associate the two words. To connect the name Ransom with the act of
where it all
ransoming
weaves together
would have been for
is
him a mere
just
pun.
such
But even
good
his voluble
writing.
self did not now dare to suggest that the voice was making a play upon words. All in a moment of time he perceived that what was, to human philologists, a mere accidental resemblance of two sounds, was in truth no accident. The whole distinction between things accidental and things designed, like the distinction between fact and myth, were purely terrestrial. The pattern is so large that within the little frame of earthly experience there appear pieces of it, between which we can see no connection, and other pieces between which we can. Hence, we rightly, for our use, distinguish the accidental from the essential. But step outside that frame and the distinction drops down into the void, fluttering useless wings. He had been forced out of the frame, caught up into the larger pattern. He knew now why the old philosophers had said that there is no such thing as chance or fortune beyond the moon. Before his mother had been born, before his ancestors had been called ransoms, before ransom had been the name for a payment that delivers, before the world was made, all these things had so stood together in eternity that the very significance of the pattern at this point lay in their coming together in just this fashion. And he bowed his head and groaned and repined against his fate, to be still a man and yet to be forced up into the metaphysical world to enact what philosophy only thinks. "My name also is Ransom," said the voice. It was some time before the purport of this saying dawned upon him. He whom the other worlds called Malodil was the world Ransom, his own Ransom. Well he knew. But to what purpose was it said now? Before the answer came to him, he felt its insufferable approach, and held out his arms before him as if he could keep it from forcing open the door of his mind. But it came. So that was the real issue. If he now failed, this world also would hereafter be redeemed. If he were not the Ransom, another would be. Yet nothing was ever repeated, not a second.
Not a second crucifixion. Nothing is ever done twice. If it were, it would negate everything. The thing that people get hung up on with free will is they can't wrap their head around there being something above them. Like, that's literally all it is. I mean, I can try and give you the excuse me, the longer form explanation for it, but it literally just boils down to you just don't fucking understand. And what's incredible is for almost 3,000 years, there have been written records of people who understood more in these types of concepts than people that speak so fucking loud about garbage they know nothing of. That, like I said, okay, if we're to give any sort of credence to any sort of evolutionary creativity, whatever sort of like two words you want to hodgepodge together and psychosyllabically mash together to create nonsense, go for it. I will still guarantee you none of it comes close to the clarity of how God has come into time, fulfilled prophecies, and then continued to show that the truth in his apostolic succession, the truth in the miracles that have happened in the church, the technological advances that have been in the positive direction for society versus the technological advances that have been towards the negative direction in society, and who and what their belief systems were can be plotted on a graph. And as much as I don't want to be charitable to fucking Andrew from the Crucible, like, if he were to do that fucking argument where technology isn't bad, like, I could have given him better notes on it. It's so embarrassing. Like, yes, you can make an argument that technology isn't inherently evil. I get it, whatever. You made a dog shit argument, dude. Absolute dog shit. And the only reason it really was is because you have no fucking ability to listen to anybody. But I get it, because you've probably streamed for God knows how many hours at this point. Is probably worse than my Fortnite play history, you know? Everybody's got a vice, right? Chief. Alright. Let's get back to this.
Crucifixion, perhaps, who knows, not even a second incarnation, some act of even more appalling love, some glory of yet deeper humility. For he had seen already how the pattern grows, and how from each world it sprouts into the next through some other dimension. The small external evil which Satan had done in Malacandra was only as a line. The deeper evil he had done in earth was as a square. If Venus fell, her evil would be a cube, her redemption beyond conceiving, yet redeemed she would be. He had long known that great issues hung on his choice, but as he now realized that the true width of the frightful freedom that was being put into his hands, a width to which all merely spatial infinity seemed narrow, he felt like a man brought out under naked heaven, on the edge of a precipice, into the teeth of a wind that came howling from the pole. He had pictured himself till now standing before the Lord like Peter, but it was worse. He sat before him like Pilate. It lay with him to save or to spill. His hands had been reddened, as all men's hands have been, in the slaying before the foundation of the world. Now, if he chose, he could dip them again in the same blood. Mercy, he groaned. And then, Lord, why me? But there was no answer. The thing seemed impossible. But gradually something happened to him, which had happened to him only twice before in his life. It had happened once while he was trying to make up his mind to do a very dangerous job in the last war. It had happened again while he was screwing his resolution to go and see a certain man in London and make to him an excessively embarrassing confession which justice demanded. In both cases, the thing had seemed a sheer impossibility. He had not thought but known that, being what he was psychologically incapable of doing it. And then, without any apparent movement of the will, as object and unemotional as the reading on a dial, there had risen before him with perfect certitude the knowledge, about this time tomorrow you will have done the impossible. The same thing happened now. His fear, his shame, his love, all his arguments were not altered in the least. The thing was neither more nor less dreadful than it had been before. The only difference was that he knew, almost as a historical proposition, that it was going to be done.
So this was part of the thing that I also thought was a good tie-in to the whole Zelda stuff, the Legend of Zelda series, especially with this whole Tears of the Kingdom time traveling nonsense. That it just I fucking hate time travel. It's so gay. It's like a weak writing point that falls apart all the time. And they could have done it so much better. They didn't. And so we're left here with that. But in opposition to that, we have C.S. Lewis, who has not only, how do you describe it? He has not only written about, in this moment, multiple times where firsthand he understood having to go to a level of violence that would end up costing some or multiple people's lives, and walking into it as if it were already done, the same way that Jesus, who was fully God and fully man, in going to the cross, did understand that it was already done. If he truly was Jesus the Christ, then he would know in that moment. Then obviously there's no sort of first-hand TMZ interview that confirms that for us, but there is so many more better things. Mo butter, as what's that fucking fat reality TV show, Honey Boo Boo, and her mom would say, mo butter, mo better. The amount of truth that comes through just the history of Christianity that has been shown just in the short amount of time of like really digging in, and that's been, I want to say like four years, maybe 5, I don't know. In that amount of time, become autistic about it, obviously, to where I'm playing Zelda games and comparing C.S. Lewis doing fictional theology and talking about the Byzantine Empire. I just think there's so much more about these stories that people need to hear and listen to. So, I hope that my reactions and my level of frustration in trying to portray those different thoughts and ideas, and hopefully at least hitting a few of them out for you guys, ends up making for something of value. It's been quite frustrating, actually, trying to cover all the topics that I think I was covering. I should have probably just done it on Saturday, considering then I'd had a full night's sleep and then not just got off of work. But I think this is fine. There's a lot of different other topics, and I'm not obviously anybody popular, so I won't be able to get this help But anybody that's listening or listens later and you have thoughts about any of these sections, excuse me, of the different books or the clips of the videos they had from the Zelda series, let me know, and I can expand on those. Maybe I'll do a short on something, I don't know, that I might have missed because I had a ton of notes. Why am I yawning so much? Sorry. Alright, so with that being said, I am almost at 1:45 right now, so I have 15 minutes. And you want to know how I'm going to spend all the rest of it? Running out the rest of this chapter and then playing 2 songs from my homie Made by Filth. So that way I can have the front covered by Cancer Culture and OP31. And then have Made by Filth on the end. So you're not going to hear from me for the rest of it. I'll hang out and chat if anybody's stopping by or if anybody's listening to this. Have a good night. I am ready for bed. Holy shit. I am ready for bed. God bless.
He might beg, weep, or rebel, might curse or adore, sing like a martyr or blaspheme like a devil. It made not the slightest difference. The thing was going to be done. There was going to arrive in the course of time a moment at which he would have done it. The future act stood there, fixed and unalterable, as if he had already performed it. It was a mere irrelevant detail that it happened to occupy the position we call future instead of that which we call past. The whole struggle was over, and yet there seemed to have been no moment of victory. You might say, if you liked, that the power of choice had been simply set aside and an inflexible destiny substituted for it. On the other hand, you might say that he had been delivered from the rhetoric of his passions and had emerged into unassailable freedom. Ransom could not for the life of him see any difference between these 2 statements. Predestination and freedom were apparently identical. He could no longer see any meaning in the many arguments he had heard on this subject. No sooner had he discovered that he would certainly try to kill the unmanned tomorrow than the doing of it appeared to him a smaller matter than he had supposed. He could hardly remember why he had accused himself of megalomania when the idea first occurred to him. It was true that if he left it undone, Malildil himself would do something greater instead. In that sense, he stood for Malildil. But no more than Eve would have stood for him by simply not eating the apple, or that any man stands for him in doing any good action. As there was no comparison in person, so there was none in suffering. Or only such a comparison as may be between a man who burns his finger putting out a spark and a fireman who loses his life in fighting a conflagration because the spark was not put out. He asked no longer, why me? It might as well be he as another. It might as well be any other choice as this. The fierce light which he had seen resting on this moment of decision rested in reality on all. I have cast your enemy into sleep, said the voice. He will not wake till morning. Get up, walk 20 paces back into the wood. There, sleep. Your sister sleeps also.
Oh, how we long for Old Spice.
I cannot deal with what is changing. In my fields, feels like quicksand sinking. In the morning, still I got these memories. Paid for breakfast and I don't think I'm hungry. I cannot deal with what is changing. In my fields, feels like quicksand sinking. In the morning, still I got these memories. Paid for breakfast and I don't think I'm hungry. Feeling like a robot, rusty when my joints lock. Oil can tin man, no thoughts, body rock. Time stop, broken clock, got my wrist, no rocks. Dirty leather, torn clock, stained shirt and one sock. What I need is what I got. Sowing seeds, wait for the crop, play for the bop. At my door, don't knock, leave it alone. No cops, taking stocks on my axe, another notch. Slaying fools till no wops in my head till time stops. I don't need nobody to tell me that I'm okay. Whisper prayers till the pain fade away. I don't need nobody to tell me that I'm okay. Whisper prayers till the pain fade away. I cannot deal with what is changing. In my fields, feels like quicksand sinking. In the morning, still I got these memories. Paid for breakfast and I don't think I'm hungry. I cannot deal with what is changing. In my fields, feels like quicksand sinking. In the morning, still I got these memories. Paid for breakfast and I don't think I'm hungry.